What is happening, you guys? It's your boy LDAWB coming at you with a new video. Today I want to talk about something rather unique. I love video games, as you guys may know, and I do love art in video games, more on the relative scale of art and design versus gameplay in video games. In the past, I've remade a couple of video game covers and put my spin into it, and I've always had a passion for video game box art. I think in the medium of box art, or rather in the medium of cover art, I think because you're creating art in a very small space, and I speak in relative term because I know it's different for American, or rather North American box art versus Japanese versus, I'm gonna use PAL, the PAL version. I know they're all different, but just creating box art can be difficult. I think creating in a small box art is a make or break depending on what you do with it. I think for that in itself, because it's such a challenge to create in that space, there are some box arts that have stood the test of time, I would say. There are some that haven't, of which I don't want to be negative, because I know that there are some videos out there with the worst video game box art. But today I just wanted to focus on my top 10 PlayStation box art. Now this pertains to the North American version, not the PAL version or the Japanese versions, which arguably most of these on this list is better than North American. But today I just want to specifically focus on my top PlayStation North American box art ever, my list. So if you guys have your top 10, just comment below and let me know what your favorites are and what are your worst. So all that said, let's get into it with number 10. My number 10 pick is Saga Frontier 2. Obviously from the get-go, the Japanese and the PAL versions are better, arguably way better. But for this particular entry, because this game means a lot to me personally, I do like the fact that it is very simple. I think when you're dealing with a box art, because I honestly have never played a Saga Frontier game up until this point, and Saga Frontier 2 was my first one, and it was the box art that actually got me interested in playing the game. So for what it represents, the simplicity of the cover, how it has the main character, obviously there are two main characters, but you have the main character fully colored and you have hand-drawn sketches on the cover, signifies that this is a very unique and authentic game. So this game is very near and dear to me, and it's not cumbersome, but it's simple in the right way. So that's my number 10, Saga Frontier 2. Square, please remaster it soon. My number 9 pick would have to be the Final Fantasy VII North American box art, simply for its simplicity. It's not a very in-your-face, jaw-dropping, over-the-top design. It just captures the nostalgia of what that game was about, because the white, and even to this day when I draw fan art for Final Fantasy VII, I keep the white around the characters, is because I don't think that they had to actually have Cloud, because just the logo would have worked. But obviously, because you're trying to introduce new people to the series, having a blonde-haired spiky guy with a big sword does help. And I do specifically remember this box art for me personally, and obviously this was my first Final Fantasy, so having a giant sword does help in this situation. Number 8 entry into this list is not Tekken 3, which is iconic. It is a very iconic game, no question, no debate, but rather Tekken 2. Yes, Tekken 2 with the weird faces, the stare of death, which all the characters do. I will give a shout out to Tekken 1. Tekken 1 had the large box art when the PlayStation came out. It wasn't a square shape, it was like rectangle. I do remember the composition of all the characters being in one picture with Kazi at the top, Jack at the very top, foreshadowing all the characters and everyone else following suit. I love the composition. But going forward to Tekken 2, I thought that box art did it great. It had a picture of Heihachi being mad as hell and wanting revenge. It just had the right balance of composition. It wasn't too much like Tekken 1, and it wasn't too simple like Tekken 3 was. Tekken 3, by the time Tekken 3 came out, you didn't really have to do much. You just had to just put any, Jin Kazama was the only thing that you needed to have on Tekken 2. But Tekken 2, I still go back to Tekken 2 because Tekken 2 still is a good example of good design. They were still playing with 3D at the time, and I know it's cringy now. I mean, obviously it's meme worthy to this day, but it still holds up and I still like it for what it is. Okay, so my number 7, this was kind of difficult to really put into this category. I really didn't want to put it here, but for reference, my number 7 would have to be Darkstalkers 1, I believe. Now, full transparency, I've never actually played this game. When I was a kid, renting games in Blockbuster, because that was a thing every weekend, I would immediately rent Street Fighter Alpha, which Street Fighter Alpha was not a good game. Or it was a good game, but what I mean is that that box art was just horrendous. But every time I would rent that game, I would always pass by the Darkstalkers and just look at how visually striking it was. And obviously it was done by Bengus. Bengus, legendary Capcom artist. I've mentioned him before. Loved the guy's artwork back when I was a kid, and I just could not just ignore it. Obviously, I was pretty sheltered, so if I had gotten that game, I think my parents would probably question me in regards to why, because it was, being a sheltered kid, you can't really play vampires and all that stuff and sheltered lifestyle, but I would still just be mesmerized by it. And I think that was the era of Bengus that really had me really keen, because Street Fighter Alpha, when I was renting it, was done by Bengus as well, so that always caught my eye, and that's my number 7. So now for number 6, fast forward, mentioning Street Fighter. Now my number 6 would have to be Street Fighter Alpha 2, for again the minimalistic approach. And obviously this is another legendary Capcom game, one of my favorite fighting games of all time, next to Street Fighter 3, Rival Schools, Project Justice. This was very simple and very striking. It had Ryu and Akuma, that's all you need, and obviously Sakura in the back. I love this. I loved it. This was all I needed. This was all I needed. This was a fine improvement from the first Street Fighter Alpha box art. Unfortunately, the North American box art was horrendous. Again, like I said, a little bit of some trivia. This art was derived from a WWF cover, or inspired from it. So I think that was very interesting that they took inspiration from this. And it worked. It worked. The art is amazing. I love how simple, minimalistic, and striking it is. So that's my number 6. So now where are we? Number 5. My number 5 pick is The Legend of Dragoon. Legend of Dragoon. Again, I'm not a big fan of a lot of stuff. I'm guilty of this because I've drawn or redrawn some covers that I thought were too simple and added more to it. But I realized that sometimes having more elements in a cover loses the magic. And I think every time that I look at the Legend of Dragoon box art and how simple it is with the 3 characters being dragoons and how Dart kind of flows through the cover, still works. And it actually makes everything more like, what is this world? Like, why are these guys with the dragoons and the wings and the sword? And you're like, okay, who's the blonde dude? Obviously, this is from the Final Fantasy VII era, so the game was amazing. The cover is great. It's legendary. It means a lot to me. It's very nostalgic. And that's my number 5. My number 4, I know this is just a bunch of RPGs, right? Is Chrono Cross. Going with Legend of Dragoon and the simple approach, I honestly feel like the design in itself it helped. Putting the logo at the far top or right actually worked, because you have Lynx on the left, you have Surge on the bottom, and you have Kid on the other side, and it works. It's simple. It has the element of 3. I don't know whether this is a philosophy and you can't put more than 3 things or what for a guaranteed attention grabber. I don't know if that's the case for my number 1 pick. I think that this still goes with the minimalism, but yet it's colorful enough to grab you in. My number 3, and this is yet another RPG. Yay for RPGs. My number 3 is the ultra cult classic, a hand-drawn masterpiece, which is Wild Arms. Wild Arms is a very special game and means the world to me. So I love the box art for this. Taking the element of 3, just like before, everything, it was if they were in the background, in the sunset. Seeing Rudy, Cecil, and Jack, and even the giant robot or the earth golem in the back gives you a sense of this is a Western. This is an anime in the desert or in the cliffs, and it's a Western. The anime-esque of it helped. I appreciate it more when you play the game, or rather after you play the game, and then you look back at it and you're like, you think about the intro, you think about the characters, you think about the design, and then you're like, man, all of that is woven together in such a way that this box art really has it right, even to this day. Back in 1997, back when Final Fantasy VII wasn't released yet, it had to stand up to it. It still does. It still does. So that's my number 3. My number 2, going in the realm of RPGs, is a game that admittedly I have never played to this day, to be very honest. That game is Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story is a beautiful drawn cover by one of my most favorite artists in Square that I honestly really thought that this was unique. Obviously, Tetsuya Nomura was unique, but there were 2 sides that I was looking at the time, in Square rather. Tetsuya Nomura was one designer, and then in the other side, the artist's name for the evilly side, or rather when 9 came out, Tactics came out, Vagrant Story came out, Akihiko Yoshida is his name. I really liked his pencil work. He was the one that was normalizing the no-nose characters, penciling out the deformed characters at the time and making them kind of this sepia-like pencil tone feel that wasn't normalized back then, and it was ballsy. Obviously, it's very different from Tetsuya Nomura's bold contrast artwork, and very different, but Vagrant Story was something that I looked at and I was like, man, it's really good. It's really good. It's almost like the logo meant to be on that picture, right? But I don't know if Akihiko was planning on putting it there or what, but it just fits. It just fits with the feel, the vibe, sepia, the hand-drawn aesthetic. Probably the best hand-drawn cover art for the North American side of the PlayStation, in my opinion. It still holds up to this day. It's still amazing. I wonder if 3D, I know this has nothing to do with this video, but I wonder if 3D will ever reach that point of pencil-y aesthetic. I'm waiting for that day to happen. It might happen, it might not, but man, it would be great if it did. So, my number 1. I know it took a long time to get to this point, but number 1, my most favorite PlayStation 1 box art ever, in my opinion, is Suikoden 2. Not Suikoden 1, guys. Not that horrible box art. I'm not talking about that, okay? The PAL version and the Japanese version, congrats. That would probably be on my list, but it's not on the North American version, so obviously I'm gonna have to pick the brother, the sequel, the sophomore release, Suikoden 2. Suikoden 2 is the right amount of characters, the right amount of composition. It's in my opinion, a good balance of not too much and not too little. Now, I went earlier and talked about the Law 3 or whatever it's called and how that kept going, but with this one it still pertained to the Law 3 because you had 3 central characters, right? And the fact that there's like all these other characters in the back and they're not vibrant, they're not in your face, but they almost look like they're tiled in segments in this story, this mural, if you will. And obviously that game is amazing. Obviously it's legendary in its own right. Hooray, we're getting remasters of that. I'm ecstatic about that, but I will mention that this box art has still stood the test of time, in my opinion. I really like how detailed this is. I really like how layered and how it tells you so much about the game when you hadn't even played it yet, but you know that this game is deep. You know that this game is going to be engaging. You know there's going to be some tension. There's going to be some battles. There's going to be some epic stuff going on. I'm telling you, man, like box art back in the day, or rather when it was prevalent, it was a make or break. Either you had a asinine box art or you had a really good one. And if you had a good one, that's great, because that's all it took for people to pick up your game. I have to say, for all these, and of course if you have your own, please let me know in the comments below, but it's essentially important to retain that, to retain an allure. Not go crazy, you know, like just be simple, be symbolic. How symbolic are your cover art? Yeah, didn't mean to get into that tirade, but that is my list. Again, I love the PlayStation 1. And if you somehow enjoyed me talking about my favorite PlayStation 1 games, please like, subscribe, do all that jazz. You already know what to do. I'm not going to bore you about all that. If you like it, great. If you didn't like it, great. Feedback is important as always. Thank you to my Patreons. I really appreciate you guys again for supporting me and helping me. And thank you for watching. And I will have videos of art process soon, so look out for that. Stay tuned. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a good day, good week, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.